So it looks like the clear winner is that most of you, we got 48% are IT staff, a number of directors, a few librarians, and then a few associates. So it's always good to know who our audience is. Here, share results. Okay, so now you guys can all kind of see. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about our presenters and our event today. So we have some really great speakers lined up to kind of talk about cybersecurity, and we're going to let them each kind of talk a little bit about their area and kind of their experience. Then we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and have more of a Q&A session. We have some questions, but we'd always like to hear from you as well. Let me get started with Blake Carver. He's a systems administrator at the LYRASIS Digital Technologies Services, where he manages the servers and infrastructure that support their hosted archive space, Isladora, and collection space. Blake holds an MLS from sunny Buffalo and has worked as an academic librarian, as a programmer at .com startup, and as a records manager. He's also known as the guy behind LIS News, LIS Wire, and LIS Host. Blake was one of the first librarian bloggers, congratulations, and is a member of Library Journal's First Movers and Shakers, which I think was really cool. Blake has presented widely at professional conferences talking about open source systems, Drupal, WordPress, and IT security and privacy for libraries. So welcome, Blake.
Thank you.
Faith has been the director of the Kokomo-Howard County Public Library for the past 8 years, and believes that every library can continue to reinvent the ways in which it works to improve and enrich its community. Prior to coming to Kokomo, Faith administered youth services in public librarians in North Carolina, Ohio, and Illinois. She holds an MLS from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which makes her an honor bound to say snarky things about Duke and Coach K. Aaron Smith is the head of information technology and facilities at the Kokomo-Howard County Public Library. He holds an MLS from Indiana University, Bloomington, and an MPM from Indiana University, Kokomo. And then Eric is a security and risk leader driving compliance and security at Cengage, with over 17 years of experience in information security and risk compliance. He has an avid interest and focus on automation, security monitoring, data protection, system and application security. He has spent time at 2 other educational software publishing companies, also within the security function. His focus there was around security of the products being delivered to customers, as well as the security incident and event management. So welcome to our wonderful speakers. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Blake. Blake, did you want to screen share?
I shall.
Okay.
Hopefully everybody can see my PowerPoint now. How's that look? Good? Just see the slide? Okay, cool, thanks. Okay, so for those of you who haven't heard about LYRASIS, we're basically just a big members organization. We're mostly in the south and east. Our headquarters is down in Atlanta, and I'm in not quite snowy, but cold and rainy Buffalo here. And my job is to keep these things online and running and secure and safe. I've been doing web stuff since about 2002. I started my blog in 1999, which makes me feel super old to say that. It's important to understand that we are all targets. That is, all of us individuals, we all have something of value. This is actually the 5th time I've talked this month, and last week there was a great story that I shared with a group that someone had made, I think it was $600,000 specializing in selling Netflix accounts. So we all have something of value to the bad guys out on the internet. And libraries are targets, and it's hard for people to understand that right away, I think. We are, even a small library is pretty big. I mean, we have 10, 15, 20 public access machines out there, and we have all sorts of other stuff plugged into the network. And we're also part of a larger organization. Either we're on campus and we're part of a university, or we're part of a city or county government. So maybe the library is just the easiest way to get into a larger network, a larger target. And there are hacker groups out there that specialize in libraries. The big one is the Silent Librarian Group, which is, I don't know, as a librarian, the whole silent thing just gets old really quick, I think. But they're probably out of Iran, and they're probably after like journal articles and access to that kind of stuff. But there's groups out there that are specifically after us. And I always like to say security is getting better, which is a good thing. There's a huge industry out there, people working dedicated to making things more secure. But at the same time, it's getting worse faster, because there's also a huge industry out there of the bad guys trying to break into things and steal things. And they are highly incentivized. They are very motivated. There is unbelievable money to be made out there. Someone is talking about ransomware later today, I believe, and the money, especially in ransomware now, is just absolutely crazy. And they have skill and focus and tools and time. They have specialties. It's not just a teenager sitting in their parents' bedroom like we all, the old stereotype. It's a huge industry out there, and it is just crazy. So 6 things that are very important that sort of encompass everything that I'll talk about in the next few minutes. Passwords. Every day we start with a password. We all have who knows how many passwords. I lost track of all the passwords in my passwords manager at this point. The secret to passwords: make sure that they're very long and that they are unique. You need to have passwords, plural, not just one password for everything. Be paranoid, especially with your email. Anytime you get an email, it looks a little bit weird with an attachment or a link in it, especially think about it, analyze it, ask somebody. Make sure everything's backed up. Make sure everything is running the latest, greatest version of it. Do regular training. And then there's all the other things that you can do, all the settings, all the little checkboxes and things in your operating system and your apps and your applications. So I'm going to talk about what you can do for you and what you can do around the library. A good place to start is to use a password manager. There's a whole ton of them out there. The 3 that I recommend starting with, checking out LastPass, Bitwarden, and 1Password. I use LastPass and 1Pass, and I have used Bitwarden. They all do the job. They're different in some ways. LastPass is sort of the big one out there. It's been around probably the longest. And to go along with your password manager, enable multi-factor authentication, or 2FA, second factor authentication, especially on your email. Your email is your most important account, and you need to keep the bad guys out of there. So whether it's Google Authenticator or Duo, Authy, there's all sorts of different ways to do that. But use a second factor of authentication for everything that allows it. I have, I don't know how many things on my Google Authenticator now. On your portable devices, especially if you're traveling, when that happens again, hopefully later this year, maybe last year or next year, make sure that they are encrypted. And if you're on a public network, if you're out and about at Starbucks, hopefully we can do that again soon. Use a paid VPN. ExpressVPN and Nord and PIA are probably the biggest ones out there, but there's also a ton of those out there. I use Nord only because one time they had a really big sale and it ended up being super cheap. So I got an account for, it's like $3 a month for 3 years or something. Don't use one of the free ones, especially in the Google store. They tend to be not very secure, and they're also free for a reason. They're going to be following you around, doing bad things, tracking you. Browser extensions. Our browsers are probably the way that we interact with the internet, the world, everything, every day. Lock them down as much as you can. There's all sorts of settings in there. They're becoming more privacy friendly, especially Firefox. There's another one out there called Brave. Google Chrome tends to be not super privacy friendly, but maybe more secure. That's sort of a whole discussion by itself. But the two that I recommend, Privacy Badger from the EFF and uBlock Origin, they're both tracking and ad blockers. They make the internet so much nicer. If you don't run with an ad blocker, try installing one and see how much better your daily life is. There's a ton of these out there. There's also one called Ghostery that's kind of neat, but there are a huge range of them. Check out Protective DNS. There's a bunch of these. There's the Quad 9s and there's Cloudflare. There's Google has their own DNS. There's a bunch of them out there. Next DNS is the one that I like because it's mostly free. It will probably be free for you as a person, but you can roll ad blockers into your DNS, which is really, really neat. Super cool service. Kind of hard to explain in a couple minutes how it works, but basically you change the DNS server that your computer or your phone uses. It uses NextDNS or 9.9.9.9. Is that 4 nines? Whatever 4 nines sounds like. Cloudflare is 4 ones. And they do things at the DNS level, like for NextDNS block ads, but Quad 9s do some privacy stuff, some security blocking as well. So in general, keep things updated. And as a professional sysadmin and just somebody who uses computers all the time, I know that that is sort of a dangerous thing to do. I just updated this thing a couple days ago and the back button on my mouse stopped working and my screensaver broke, which obviously is not a big deal, but it's just super annoying. So keep things updated as much as you dare. Don't run as root or admin, especially on your Windows machine. Windows are the biggest, Windows machines are the biggest targets out there because everybody uses Windows, and thinking like a bad guy, you're going to go after Windows because they are everywhere, right? You don't want to specialize in being a hacker that hacks, I don't know, light bulbs or smart fridges because there's just not that many of them out there. You want to specialize in what everybody has, and that's Windows. Make sure you don't disable the firewalls on everything. Keep those running. Remove anything that you're not using, especially on your portable devices. The apps on your phone are tracking you. That's why they're free. If you're not free, you're the you're the person being sold. So remove everything that you're not using. They are targets and they are giving stuff away maybe. And of course, back your stuff up. Keep it safe. Put it in the cloud. Put it somewhere so you have it if you happen to lose it. So around the library, there's something called threat modeling in IT security, and basically it's knowing what you have and knowing who might be going after it and knowing why they want it, how could they acquire it, could they benefit from its use, can they sell it, can they hold it hostage, can they use and abuse it, and how damaging would the loss of the data be? You know, if somebody hacks your smart toaster or your light bulbs, maybe not a big deal, you can just put another light bulb in. But could they use that? Could they pivot around the network because they got into your light bulb or your smart fridge or your old voicemail system? One of the first times I saw a big library get ransomware in a major way was, I think it was in St. Louis. And it ended up that the report was that they ended up getting into everything because somebody forgot to update an old voicemail server in a closet somewhere. So everything can be used and abused in some way. So it's important to know what you have and think about how important it is and how to secure it. So one thing I like to recommend is that people go into their library and think like a bad guy. Basically attack your library in a very careful way after you've practiced on other things. Don't just go after it and see what you can do. But it's important, especially public libraries and academic libraries, we invite people to just come into the library and use our computers and do things. So it's important that you, if you have an interest in security, that's why you're here. You know, Run Kali Linux is a Linux distro that's designed to attack things. Walk in your library and see what you can do. Think about what you have. look around, know what's on your network. That's a really important thing. So make sure you lock down all the things, anything with a public IP address on your network, in your library, pay attention to it, update it, make sure that you're not using default passwords, all that stuff. Make sure on the public PCs that there's not just a weird new thing plugged in a USB port somewhere. That libraries have made the news where people have found hardware keyloggers plugged into them. As far as the users, make sure that you do things called least privilege and zero trust. Basically, don't trust anything. Make sure everything's updated and patched. And I know at scale, at anything more than just a couple of things, it's hard to do that. That's a big part of my day, is making sure updates are done and that they didn't break anything. Check your settings, all of these settings, whether it's Microsoft Office, macros turned off, you know, Windows, there's all sorts of things in Windows and all of the things that we run. And make sure that you don't just have a single network around your library, have at least two, maybe a public one, a private one, administration, finance, you know, basically as much as you can stand, break up that network. It makes it much more safe. Offer training at your library. Do a lot of planning and exercises for training. You want to train your staff, your patrons, and your bosses. Make sure that if you're, I know there was 5 or 10 administrators here, make sure you're training down, and make sure that if you're part of the IT, make sure you're training up so that your boss, your board, you name it, everyone understands that security is important, that you as a library are a target, and that there needs to be money in the budget for all this stuff. Have plans in place, especially for things like ransomware and email compromise and employee offboarding. And exercises. Attack your library very carefully. Practice first. But make sure that you practice what happens if the ILS goes down, what happens if you know, your smart light bulbs all die. Have not just the files backed up, but the procedures in place so that you know, well, we lost the public machines, we lost our whole place got ransomware. What do we do? Well, we pull out these paper things and we do this all by hand until we get it all back up. And don't forget about your website. For a long time, I've been helping people unhack websites. It's no fun. It's easy to forget to update your WordPress and passwords and other stuff. So back up all of these stuff around your library, files, maybe do the entire computer as an image. And you want to back up your backups. Don't just put a backup on a local drive, because especially if you get ransomware, the bad guys are going to, of course, encrypt your backups and you're not going to be able to use them. So put a backup somewhere else, whether it's in the cloud or it's on a drive that's unplugged or it's in another data center. Make sure that you back up your backups for worst case scenarios. Your library should have a password manager as well. LastPass and 1Password and Dashlane. I'll do the enterprise password thing. We use LastPass around LYRASIS. It's not super cheap, but it's definitely worth it, because I can't even, I'm sure we have thousands of passwords in that at this point. Around the library, it's good to have logging and auditing in place. I definitely don't underestimate the amount of time and effort it takes to do even a limited amount of this. There's something called Security Onion. I think it's sort of a nice compromise. It does a lot of stuff. It's not super complicated. It's open source. If you want to check that out, or there's a ton of other things. There's something called SIMS or SIEMS that is basically you just feed all your stuff into one place, so you're able to have one place to watch everything. And there's something called the Zero Trust Security Model, something you really need to do around the library, especially because we have people coming in and out, especially on your network. Basically, don't trust anyone or anything. It's more accurate to say don't trust anything, because we're worried about the things that are connecting to our network. And I'll finish up with open source intelligence, or OSINT or OSINT. It is the most librarian-y part of IT security, I think. It's really, really neat. And it's fun. It's basically using everything out there that's just sort of on the web or on the dark web or hiding away in places that librarians would be really good at finding. There's a website called the osintframework.com. I think it's a good place to start. Very pointy, clicky, friendly way to sort of see all the tools and all the neat stuff you can do with open source intelligence. And it's really a great way to start sort of finding out where your library stuff is, where your library's name, or even your name is ending up. So that's about all I had. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them now or during the discussion afterwards.
Thank you so much, Blake. That was really informative. I'm going to turn it over for kind of a different take on all of this is Faith and Aaron. You should be able to share your screen. And again, if you guys have any questions, put them in the chat and we will answer them later.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
All right, okay, great. As we were introduced, my name is Aaron Smith, and I'm the head of facilities and IT here at the Kokomo-Howard County Public Library. And Faith Brautigam is our director, so I'll go ahead and let her introduce herself.
I'm Faith, and I have to say that if we had spent time with Blake in advance, we wouldn't be here doing this part about our whole bad, our bad cyber breach experience. So I'm regretting that we didn't know Blake.
Okay, and I guess as I would also mimic what Faith said, Blake, whenever you were talking about some of these things, it's just like, ooh, oh, you know, hindsight being 2020. A lot of the things he touched on, I would say, were things that were discussed in our organization at one point or another after our event. Basically, to give a little bit of background, our library had a ransomware attack in September of 2020. What had happened is I believe it was a Friday morning and that we had received some text messages and communications from staff who weren't able to access email. As well as a few other things. And whenever our systems admin got in and myself, we started seeing a lot of files had strange file extensions and things weren't working. And then we found there was an HTML file listed in an account. It was listed in multiple places that basically said that we had been the victims of a ransomware attack, and it gave a contact who we could contact about getting decryptors. And basically everything in our network was encrypted, including our backups. So there were even thumb drives that were stuck in people's computers, various places in the building that had been encrypted. And it was just quite an experience. So just to give a little bit more background on our system at that time, we have 3 public locations, 3 public branches, and then we have a 4th building, which is a non-public office building. And we were running a series of servers on site, both physical servers and virtualized servers. And the network had been kind of built up over the course of about 10 or 11 years. And we had gone through a series of systems admins over that time. And they just all kind of built one layer on another. And then I was made the head of IT a few months before that. I was actually head of circulation and facilities before. And we also had, we had roaming profiles for all of our staff. And that's kind of a snapshot of what we had going on. And of course, I did give a little bit about our library landscape with the our 4 locations and everything. And we have an internal IT team of 4 people total. We had our previous systems admin had left about 2 months previously, and we had a webmaster who we had given additional duties as our systems admin. So having said that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Faith, and she'll give a little bit more information about our organization.
Yeah, I thought it might be helpful for you to think a little bit about, how do we compare to you? And we serve about 76,000 people, and it's a mix of like town and, rural and small town. So a little different than those of you who are in suburbia in the Chicago area. But, and I also just wanted to say that we do have internal IT, and as an administrator, I will say we had a lot of turnover in that position, and it has been challenging, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware. I mean, public libraries especially, don't pay competitive wages for the IT industry. And so as someone like me with no IT background, knowing when what is a good hire? When do I trust what the person is telling me? I mean, it's all trickier, and than I would like it to be. And I feel as if, when you're listening to us, some of it you might think, wow, how dumb could those people be? But I do want to emphasize that when Aaron was transferred to IT to be, when we redivided up responsibilities, he had no IT background, but I felt like he had the right potential to learn all of that. And he had stability. He'd been with us. He's very bright. He could learn new things. But he had not been with us long enough to have figured everything out of what we should be doing when we were hit with this attack. So at any rate, that gives you just a little bit of background of where I'm coming from as an administrator. So Aaron's going to go ahead and just tell you a little bit of what we wish we had known, some of which Blake has referred to, and things that things we missed, things we wish we realized were bad practices, or that, people had just taken over where someone else had left off. And so we wish we'd known more about a lot of that.
So I guess I'll just go on to say some of the things and I should preface everything I'm saying by the process that we went through was a multi-month process. So I'm just hitting what I think are some of the high points and condensing it down into a 20-minute presentation. So there's a lot more to this than probably what I'll say today. But I guess first off is just our system. Some of the things that we had not thought about was we were running old versions of Windows Server. I'm sure there's a few IT people probably cringed whenever I said that we had Windows Server 08 and we were running machines with that, and it was actually out of life cycle with Microsoft, and they weren't supporting it anymore with system updates and system patches and things like that. And it was just not taking the opportunity to move things over to newer Windows 2016, which actually there's now Server 2019, but just making sure that also just running updates. The source of our attack, I don't think was necessarily a vulnerability within server, but we were running an older version of a software in our system that had a vulnerability in it, and the threat actor was able to get into that particular software and exploit things, and then they were able to upgrade the privileges of the account that they had gotten into, and it just they moved through our network like that. So anyways, regular updates. I would just say probably good best practices, or make sure that you have a regular schedule as far as running updates on your systems, not just the Windows updates and other Microsoft updates, but everything. And I think, as Blake said, sometimes those will break things. So you have to keep that in mind, but doing that legwork is important. The other thing that we had was backups. We were running system backups in the state of Indiana. It says that you have to have your backups go to an off-site location. And the setup that was in place was that we had a NAS. It was a 15 terabyte NAS that was set up at a branch location, and we were using Veeam to back up system images to it. And I think we thought that we were off-site in the sense, so like if our main location burned down, we'd have all of our backups at another site. Unfortunately, when your backups are on your network, those can be encrypted too. So I think, as Blake said, you know, backups. And really probably our philosophy is now that we have three forms of backup: physical media, cloud, and then whatever's on the computer. And we have a portable hard drives that we put in a safe deposit box weekly. And another thing that I guess was kind of interesting following that model is our finance office actually did the payroll backups onto like a traditional thumb drive, and they were putting those into a safe deposit box. And whenever everything was encrypted, our finance office had our payroll backed up to a thumb drive in the safe deposit box, and it was only about a week behind. So one of the first things we were able to do is not miss payroll. They had to do a reload of the software on a laptop using a what do you call it? I'm sorry, a mobile hotspot. And then we were able to do payroll got out on time. So that was a good thing. Another thing is the oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up there. Our network. Obviously, it was kind of a lot of things were older on it. The other thing was ease of access. We had an external IP address on a server that some of the IT staff were using whenever they needed to do work remotely or they were at home. This public IP address would allow them to get into the server and then use remote desktop to move to different systems within the network. Unfortunately, whenever you have easy access, and also access is also kind of getting more complicated with, or more prevalent because we've got people working from home and remotely, especially with COVID and things like that. So people want to be able to get into the network to do work. And unfortunately, whenever you have those points of entry, if they're easy for you to get into, then the threat actors are going to be able to get in there easily as well. So that was certainly a big lesson for us to learn. The other thing is, I would say, excuse me, is just organization of the network. Like I had alluded to earlier, we had probably 10 years of just incremental things being added and things not being taken down as frequently as they should, and softwares that, you know, just might run something for someone. In particular, our vulnerability was a printer software that was used in our tech services department and hadn't been touched in 2 or 3 years. It was working, so nobody thought about it. So I would just say making sure that your organization is good, and then also that you just have a really firm grasp on what's there. And then you also need to make sure that you understand that you will probably have turnover within the IT department, especially when we're maybe not able, public libraries aren't able to keep up with the pay rates that probably private industry pays. So just make sure that you have a really consistent transition method that so one system admin leaves, another one comes in, they're able to pick up where things were left off. And I know that was one of the things that I ran into, is there was not a lot of good documentation and just, you know, being aware of what all was here. And of course, then we had furthermore, we had our systems admin leave and a new one come in, and there were things that we just didn't know. So, and otherwise I would just say keeping up with best practices. For us, it was, for example, server naming conventions is we were going based upon all of our servers were getting names that were heavy metal bands and rock bands from the 80s. Like we had Depeche Mode, Def Leppard, Tool, things like that. So while that was, and the idea behind that is if you give silly names or unmeaningful names to your servers, a threat actor gets into your network, they can't immediately go to the domain controller or the profile server or your exchange server. But the one problem with that is going back to the organization of things, it's also like, what occurs on the Def Leppard server. you know, might not be able to say immediately, whereas the naming conventions we're using now denote the location of the server and its function, so that whenever we're creating documentation and system maps and things like that, it's makes a lot more sense. And also if you're working with outside entities, like in our case, we had a forensics company come in to look at things, the explanations were a lot easier to give, and conversations, and you don't have to give a big long explanation about, you know, the naming conventions and things like that. So that is pretty much everything I've got. So I think Faith was going to go over some additional items, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to her.
I am talking mostly in terms of the kinds of things that I'm saying to the administrators who are here, or, you know, anybody who's, you know, the non-IT people, perhaps in very non-IT terms, but there are a lot of tools available, and I wish we had really known more about those or the value of those prior to learning it the hard way. And one thing I want to mention, and people have talked to me about this afterwards from other libraries, but cyber insurance is really important, and it's not necessarily included in your commercial insurance package if you don't ask for it. We did not have it when I came here, and I did not manage to get it added to our insurance until a couple, maybe less than 2 years before this breach. And an advantage, if you're kind of a smaller library, an advantage to the insurance, other than the obvious one, is that they have some baseline standards you have to meet before you can even get the insurance. So it does, if you aren't affording very good, you know, all the IT help you need, in some ways the insurance does create some standards for you to meet. There also are just a lot of products out there. For example, we now have some system monitoring software, you know, and there are different kinds of things you can purchase that are meant as exploit prevention products. We also have started to think about the quality of just some of the general software that we have. You know, it's not all alike, even though it's from the same category. So again, you know, make sure you know what you've got. And we have staff training software now that is, you know, really nice in terms of letting us see which staff will click on an attachment from a fake phishing email, that kind of stuff. So there are products out there, look at those. And in terms of practices, I think we probably should have done a better job of reaching out, asking other people, using my network, trying to make sure I had tapped into any experts I had available to me, especially when I knew there were some things that weren't right, but it's very difficult if it's not your area of expertise. And Blake mentioned this. I mean, we all have budgeting concerns, but I will tell you from experience, I wish I'd realized how valuable it is to spend some of that money on some of these other things, like software that can help prevent something like that, or, you know, even just the money that it takes to upgrade something or whatever. And for example, our phone system is a voice over internet, you know, phone system. I felt like that sounded up to date to me. I didn't think about the fact that it had been in the building for more years than really is up to date in tech terms, right? Tech, not very, you know, tech years are much quicker than regular years, I feel, as things get dated. You know, again, our disaster preparedness was not what Blake outlined, so listen to him. And I also just want to encourage you, if you're feeling stressed out about all of the cost of all of these things, is to think about the fact that there may be very low cost things like putting things on a flash drive or on a hard drive and, you know, putting it in the bank vault. I mean, don't be embarrassed to do something low tech if that's what you can afford, because it is way better than, you know, waiting until you can afford the cloud system or the whatever systems that you want, and you know, you're going to get to that, you know, and you haven't gotten to it yet. And I would say also, if you are thinking about your, you know, your the things that you're asking of your staff. You know, I wish I had been, when I asked for documentation from more than one of these, the people who were in IT and specified what I wanted, you know, I was juggling a lot of balls. I didn't follow up on that as much as I should have. You know, I mean, don't be afraid if it's not your area to still push for things that you think your organization needs. Wish I had done that more. And if the worst happens, one thing you might not be thinking of is you need to, if you have an attorney on retainer, you need to call that attorney right away. I didn't realize that because when you activate other insurance, you don't need to do that. But with this, there will be a lot of companies activated by your insurance company, and it involves a lot of law firms and a lot of contracts, and your attorney needs to be available. And our breach happened on a Friday morning. I didn't realize until late Friday afternoon, our attorney needed to know about this and needed to be present almost right away at a meeting. And then he really needed to work the majority of the weekend with us. Because, I mean, you know, be available all weekend for us. And I could have told him that Friday morning if I'd known, but I didn't. So call your attorney. If you don't have an attorney, you probably need to find one. And everybody you work with, like third-party vendors, like your ILS company, I mean, they'll need to know and be aware that it could be unpleasant. You know, they don't want to catch what you have, and so you won't be the most popular kid on the block when that happens. And what I would say really, really strongly is advocate for what you need. When we first got involved with all these companies, I mean, there are different companies, like the company that would negotiate with the threat actor is different than the company that would do the cyber forensics, who is different from the company that, you know, the law firm that administered the claim, which is different from the law firm representing the cyber insurance. So you have all these people activated, and it's very confusing. But I would say also, they aren't going to offer you extra services. So we realized pretty early on that our small IT team was not really going to be able to do all of the things that we needed to do quickly. Certainly not in the amount of time that we wanted to do it in, so that we could get back up and operating at least at a minimal level. And so we said, is there any way you would pay for someone to help us? And the answer was yes. And we asked for that to be extended a time or two. And in retrospect, I wish I had asked for even more. What's the worst they can say to you? No. But I didn't know that. I didn't, you know, we only happened onto the fact that we could get this from our insurance at all. It wasn't really clear in the types of coverage we had, to me anyway, in terms of trying to read that policy. And remember the fact that, I saw the comment about law enforcement. Actually, the law firm that handled our claim was really, or not the claim, but administered the whole process, was on top of that and knew all of that. I mean, there was a whole administrative part of cyber part of a law firm that handled everything, and the insurance just assigned them to us. So we didn't have to know that. The people handling it for us did, you know, were on top of that. But think about anything you're saying about this breach, even to your own employees, because that could end up on the front page of the newspaper or the television station or whatever. And basically anything you say also, I think sometimes we're a little trusting, like we think, oh, this is all in context. This isn't, there's nothing wrong with what I'm saying. Well, a media outlet does not necessarily take all of the context of what you say, and they don't always take the whole paragraph or whatever. So be very careful about what you're saying to your board. And even if it's on your own cell phone, that does not matter, because if you're using it for business, it's subject to public records law. So if you're in Illinois, it's referred to as FOIA, you get a FOIA request. And we had a very large, very expansive FOIA request several months after this breach. And thankfully, our attorney worked with the newspaper, and they took far less information than they had originally asked for. If we had had to actually do what they asked for, it would have cost us thousands and thousands of dollars in time trying to get that together. So again, advocate for yourself. The attorney said, hey, would you take this instead? And I was like, oh, right, they're going to go for that. But they did, because in reality, we released information of the actual out-of-pocket cost, which due to our good insurance was really low. And so there wasn't really a big story that we spent $5,000 if we have a $6 million budget. I mean, granted, that isn't the cost of the staff time, you know, et cetera, but our out of pocket was very small in terms of what we gave the, you know, the kind of thing they actually asked for. So that takes us to basically the end of our presentation. I think we went overtime a little bit. I apologize for that. And so it's probably better if your questions actually just go to the end of the end of our end of our program today, where we're going to have general question and answer. And there's our contact information. We'd be glad to hear from you afterwards. We realize some of our really practical feet on the ground stuff, you might have questions that you wanted to just direct to us directly, and we would both welcome that.
Thank you so much, Faith and Erin. That was really good. And, you know, I appreciate your willingness to share, you know, these are the missteps we made, because I think that, you know, I think a lot of us are in the same boat where we can't afford the IT that we really need in libraries. So I am going to turn it over to Eric at Cengage.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. I'm going to start by saying that this is a couple of tough acts to follow here. Definitely not going to have as practical, you know, advice to give as Blake did. I really loved the train your bosses piece, and that's something that I've tried to set up here with a Slack channel where I drop news items from security for the leaders of the company and just throughout the company to kind of consume. Because one thing that I learned was, you know, we don't necessarily have the same news sources. So some of the things that you might be learning about security or you might hear about security may not be making it to your bosses. So I really liked that piece. And then this will not be as visually stimulating as the presentation that Faith and Erin did. That was above and beyond, I think, the level that I can bring to the table here. But and they experienced some of what Blake was talking about and what I'll be talking about. And what I really liked from theirs was when they talked about the backups, and that kind of tied back to what Blake was saying about threat modeling. And so hopefully one thing that I can bring that kind of ties it all together is that what is happening out there in the industry, in the broader world, and how does that affect your threat modeling so that you can think about, well, yes, if a library goes away, we have backups because we have it at a different branch, but they're all on the same network. So if we are hit by a ransomware attack, it is the same, you know, it's basically the same network. So it's basically not offsite. So having hopefully some of the trends that I'll be talking about today will help bring that all together. So I'm going to talk about ransomware and the evolution of that, what's being called the double extortion, which is like the next level of ransomware. I'm going to talk about the specialization of cybercrime, how it's an assembly line now. Although this isn't really a trend, it's been happening for a while. It is something to think about. I'm going to talk about the Internet of Things. I know Blake talked a little bit about your smart light bulbs and how this has been the slow approaching doomsday. We've been in the security world, we've been talking about how the IoT is going to end security everywhere forever, and it never seems to come to pass. But this year has really shown, and the past year has shown some interesting stories there. I'll talk a little bit about supply chain attacks and how everyone shares software. So whether it's the vendors you buy from, or if you do any kind of internal development, you use open source. There's a lot of opportunity here for scaling of attacks, which is something that's become very troubling. And then I'll talk a little bit about disinformation and deep fakes, and changing the saying a little bit to believe none of what you hear, and maybe a quarter, maybe it's more like 10% of what you actually see. And now just make sure everyone's seeing just the slide, correct? Oh, all right. So what are some of the trends in ransomware? For a long time in security, people would talk about you don't have to be faster than the bear, If you're, camping, you have to be faster than the other person you're camping with so that the bear catches them first. But that's really changed over time. And ransomware has been one of the drivers of that. Is we're not talking about a bear. We're talking about an infinite number of mechanized bears. So one bear catches the other guy that's camping with you, and you still have to run faster. So what does that mean? Well, the largest ransom has doubled from 2019 to 2020, from 5 million that was paid to 10 million. And there's been a 171% increase in the average ransom that's paid. They're setting up help desks now to help lead people through unlocking their stuff. So, I mean, this is like a full industry that they've pulled together. And they're going so far as to pressure customers now as well. And this feeds into this double extortion, where before it was lock up your data and you pay to get it back. Now it's steal it, then encrypt it. And then if you don't pay, because they've gotten hip to the fact that many people are actually doing backups now and testing them, well, if you don't pay us because you think you can get it back, I still have a copy and I'm just going to release it to the world. So they've added on that extortion piece onto the ransomware, which is just very troubling. And now they're even going so far as to pressure customers. So they have that list of information that they have. So there's a recent example of a downstream vendor of Apple, which was a victim of a ransomware attack where they were facing this. And they went to Apple and said, hey, we hacked this other place. You should tell them that they need to pay the ransom or you'll stop doing business, because we're going to release everything we know about the particular chip that they make for you. So it's become, this full cybercrime group and approach that's really gone past just the lock it and ask for money. We've seen an increase in the number of healthcare organizations. So the lines of there is no lines here, right? It is not about what they can take from you and how they can monetize that and add value to it. It's the value to you. That's what's driving this. And that's why this sees really no bounds and no limits to the industries they'll attack. And so, that double extortion, we've seen it go from one ransomware family that's tracked, and that's I think there's 30 distinct ransomware families thereabouts that they're tracking now that had this in 2019, to 15, or about half of them that had it in 2020. So this is an ever increasing trend. So what can you do about this? Endpoint protection. So whether that is a free antivirus, which maybe not get you everything you need, but at least gets to is a barrier to entry and stops some of the most well-known of these malware families. Email filtering, so something that helps with the phishing attacks, because that is still the primary way that they're getting in. It's through people. So they'll send out phishing attacks, they're low cost and they're high reward. So filtering out that email, and there's free services out there. There's some really good paid services as well. And then phishing service simulations. So for your employees, run phishing across the board. So we do this on a quarterly basis for everyone. Everyone in the organization will get an email. It's kind of staggered over the course of a week. And it asks for them to either open a file that, isn't actually malicious, but could be, or give up their credentials on a website that they shouldn't be. And then we add some education on the back end of that. Back up your data. That's one that's kind of just been there for a while. But the last one here really talks to that double extortion, and that's what is the front page of the paper rule. So this is, don't say anything in email, Slack, IRC, whatever it is, whatever you're using, text messages, that you wouldn't want to see in the front page, because this goes back to, they're not just trying to keep you from your data, they are also trying to use the data that you have against you. So, we have some strong endpoint protection. We have email filtering that you're using, like that we're using. Like I said, we have the phishing simulations as well. All right, so specialization within cybercrime. This may be too old to be a trend, I'm sorry. So I guess it's the situation now, not necessarily the trend, but it's really that supply chain or that assembly line of hacks. So you start with researchers, and there are specific people who are looking for flaws in software, whether that's software that you buy, so commercial off-the-shelf software, or software that you create. They're looking for those flaws so that they can then pass those on to the malware authors. And they write the code to leverage those flaws, give them access into your systems, and start attacking you. But they don't actually do the attacking. They just create the malware, and then they present it to the dealers and the farmers. And these are the people who get access into your systems and then try to maintain it. They are the botnet masters. So these groups are only trying to get in, and then they'll pass it off to the consumers. And so those consumers are the last leg, and they are trying to leverage and monetize that access. And the best way to monetize these days is really still ransomware. But there are other ways. So if you are a financial institution, you might have credit card numbers. You might have some patron data about your customers that it has value in and of itself. But really, what we're seeing more and more is that it's just straight up ransomware that they're using this access for. Now, these may be different groups, and they may use like the black markets out there to trade in some of these throughout the chain. It may be they are doing vertical consolidation, and it all could be within one particular crime family, if you will, or attack group. But there is this specialization, which means that you're getting a higher level of focus on each point in that line of attack. Then we're also seeing hacking the hackers. So you see botnets going after other botnets because that malware that they're using to keep that access is still software. It's still written by people. It still has vulnerabilities in it. So they're attacking those, getting access, and then using that access to take it away from the person that they attacked. And then sometimes they're even being so kind as to help you by patching your systems for you. So if they get in through a vulnerability, they don't want somebody else to get in through that same vulnerability. They'll get their persistent access, patch the system so that nobody else can get in. What can we do about this? What can you do about this? This is really about your standard security measures. So going back to the endpoint protection that I talked about, the email filtering, the monitoring and logging that Aaron and Faith were talking about and Blake was talking about, right? So getting all of your logs into one place so you can try to identify where there are issues and where there are attacks. We also have an application security program to try and identify vulnerabilities because we do produce a lot of software. So a lot of what we do now is SaaS platforms. So that is doing penetration tests against those platforms with trained people that we hire or bring in from outside vendors, and then doing vulnerability disclosure programs. So this doesn't cost anything. It's just saying, hey, researcher, and there's a lot of people out there that want to do this and want to help. Here's the way to contact us if you see something that's wrong with our site, our network. And there's a lot of people that really just want to help. And they want that way to connect with a company, a way to connect with an organization that isn't going to put them at risk of being sued or being attacked by the law enforcement. So just making it clear the rules of engagement of a VDP, a vulnerability disclosure program, and then making a contact might get you some information that'll help you fill holes in your organization that you didn't even know existed. And then we can go a step further and really do bug bounties. And this is about paying those researchers to find it. So it really gets them motivated to go deep into the network and find things before the bad guys do. So next I want to talk about Internet of Things. And like I said, I feel like this was that slow rolling doomsday that everyone's been talking about. But this was the year that this past year was really when we started to see this come to fruition. And the big one is the Verkada breach. So Verkada is a camera company. So they do security cameras, and they have a centralized system for the images from that, much like a Ring or Nest, right? But this is focusing on some very large customers. And those were attacked. Their centralized system was hacked, and it gave access to that hacker to any video feed of any of their customers. So when we think about Internet of Things, sometimes that means a smart light bulb. but sometimes it means a video camera that you might be using for the security, the physical security of your location. And what are the consequences of that being attacked? In this case, some of their customers were jails. Some of them were prisons. It was a Tesla factory was one place where they had it. So what can they see that could put you at risk if they got access to some of these third parties that you're working with? And this is really being accelerated by the COVID pandemic and the response to that, and having everyone have to move home, but still administer all these systems. So I think, Aaron, I think it was you that was mentioning, if it's easy for you to administer it, it might be easy for the hackers to get access to it too. So more and more we're seeing that people want to connect their physical things they have to take care of to the internet so that they can do it remotely. And that's causing this to become an even bigger issue. So what can you do about it? Vendor security assessments is one way to handle this. Know who you're getting involved with and what their security practices are. There are some standard questionnaires out there that you can leverage. If you just look for vendor security questionnaire, there's some great resources out there. Educause on the higher ed side has what they call the HEC vet, but there's also things you can ask for, like a SOC 2, an ISO 27001, or something like that, where you can at least get some confidence that the vendors you're working with are actually securing their environments. Then patching. Once you get those things in, making sure you keep them up to date. I think that was a point that I heard multiple times throughout the presentations earlier today. And then multi-factor authentication. Again, very practical advice that Blake was giving earlier. This is one of the biggest things, because the attacks we're seeing more and more are against people as opposed to things, and passwords are easy to give up, easy to guess, easy to take. Multi-factor adds another level of complexity. Now, sometimes there's ways around that, but it means instead of a swath of people being attacked at once, you're forcing your attackers to go after one person at a time and raising the cost to them, which is really what this is about. And then network segmentation. I think Blake said, again, that you should have more than one network. You want to keep your smart fridge away from, or your smart lights away from your critical data and systems, and make sure they're on different networks, so that if you're not updating that printer server, that fridge, that that's not on the same network as your critical systems that have all of the data that, or payroll or whatever that might be, and making sure that you segment off any kind of attack that might hit you. Another trend we're seeing is a supply chain attack. So this is going after, instead of, the oldest example we have of this is, instead of going after Target, a large retailer with a large security team, you go after their HVAC provider. And their HVAC provider had access into their network. And so you leverage that in order to get into Target, and then you get access to their point of sales and you take their credit card numbers. So more and more we're seeing this as a way to kind of do two different things to raise the risk to reward for the attackers. One is those upstream providers may have lower security controls, but the other thing is scale. So SolarWinds was huge news at the end of last year. There was if you don't know about SolarWinds, they are a network administrative tool that is in use at many different organizations. Instead of going after each one of those organizations individually, an attacker from a nation state, and I think we've all seen who was that's been attributed to these days, in the past couple of months, I think is when that came out, attacked the supplier, SolarWinds. They knew that tool had access to so many different systems within those environments, had so much privileged access that if you attack that, you put a backdoor in there, then you don't have to attack each one individually. You have a backdoor into many different places. Microsoft was another one where we've seen recently, where for their Office 365 or M365, whichever one they're licensed for, they had a way of attacking the authentication there. And again, once they learned how to do that there, it scales. So this is part of this kind of ebb and flow of IT where, we started off being centralized with mainframes. Then we moved to separate servers. And now we're moving back to very much a similar model with the cloud, which means you have this, yes, you have quick turnaround for security controls, but you also have that one point to attack to then go after others. What can we do about this? Vendor security is the place to start, but it's not the end all be all. Nobody would have stood up and said, I don't think we should purchase SolarWinds because of their security practices. So no amount of due diligence in retrospect, but at the time really would have flagged that. So you really need to think about those other technical controls, whether it's testing, backups, having a second way of dealing with things, whether that is a manual process or another technology. So we are a customer of SolarWinds. We use SolarWinds. When the news came out, they didn't have a patch yet. So we were forced with a decision. Do we go blind on our network and potentially suffer a self-inflicted wound of not being able to identify an operational issue? Or do we, in order to mitigate that security risk, or do we take the system and take that system down? Or do we keep it on, risk the security risk, but not self-inflict a wound and maybe lose access because we just didn't see something happening on our network? We ended up taking the system down, taking the prudent approach to that. But it was only because we had some other things we could rely on in order to get the visibility into the network that we needed to continue our operations. But making sure you have that ahead of time, that way to deal with payroll, to deal with email or some type of collaboration and communication outside of your primary provider, if it comes down to that, is critical to dealing with these. And so the last one I want to talk a little bit about is disinformation and deepfakes. And this is, I think, a little bit more esoteric. It's not necessarily something that you can really do anything about these days, but it's an interesting trend that we're all, I think, dealing with. And there's kind of a couple different places where it's being done. So there's manipulation. So the speeding up and slowing down of audio or video. The big example there was the Nancy Pelosi video where they slowed it down and then tried to claim that she was drunk. But you'll see more of this where you can manipulate slightly real video or audio in order to make it appear to be something it is not. And then there's also bringing photos to life. So if you go to myheritage.com/deep nostalgia, so they're playing on the deepfakes with this. You can see here, so the GIF on the right is actually something they created. So that is not a video that's real. They took the picture that you see on the left, and using machine learning, they were able to create the image, the video on the right. So I'll make sure that everyone can get the videos because I'm running a little bit long here. The other things are generated video to audio. There's a great bit by Jordan Peele where he does Obama's voice, and then they create a video of Obama, and it's extremely convincing. So I have some links to that. Changing who is in the video. So there was a craze of putting Nicolas Cage into every movie ever, which was funny, but also very disturbing in how accurately he's replaced. And then fake audio, which is really, really straightforward to do. And there are real-time tools now where you can call in and it sounds like you're talking to a specific celebrity, and they're manipulating a person's voice, responding to you in real time in order to do that. And so, yeah, I'll make sure again that I get some of these links out to everybody. And what can you do about this? Well, it really just comes down to healthy skepticism. Make sure you're not falling victim to your own confirmation bias, and then using trusted news sources for as much as you can. All right, so I'm going to finish with hopefully kind of pulling this all together and what to do. And I break it down into people, process, and technology when we try to build controls or protections against things. People, it's about education and awareness and providing context. provide that information. Don't assume that what you know about your environment, everyone else knows about, or the security, that really interesting security news item that you just read, everyone else is reading that as well. Process, peer and colleague review. So bounce ideas off of other people, but also make sure that you're trying for critical processes. So one of the things for us, it's about vendor payments, because business email compromise is a huge thing. So when a vendor reaches out and says, I need to change the banking details that you're going to pay to, well, you should have some kind of process for reviewing that and making sure that one person can't just go in and change that, because those emails are faked all the time. So building that kind of review or redundancy into some of the critical processes you have. And then technology, MFA, multi-factor authentication. You can do it for free in most places. You can use Google Authenticator as a free tool for it. Do it wherever you can. It is the #1 thing you can do. Email filtering, just try to keep out as much cruft as you can before it gets to your users. About 75 to 80% of emails that come to our organization never get to our end users because of email filtering. Endpoint protection. This is the new place that's being attacked, whether it's because you're giving up your credentials or the browser or the web pages you're going to. So as much as possible, try to drive that into the systems you have in the libraries, the laptops and desktops people use in order to do their work. And then one of the things that's it's not necessarily new, but is really evolving quickly is user behavior analytics. Unfortunately, some of the tools out there can be quite expensive, but it really takes that SIM-SEM part up to the next level of, instead of taking all these logs about things that are happening, take logs about what people are doing and try to find where they're doing things that haven't been expected or they haven't done in the past. So thank you very much. Sorry, I went a little bit long there. Hopefully that you were able to take something away from that. And if you have any questions, I'll be sticking around to answer.
Thank you, Blake. That was really informative. And I feel like all 3 presentations, I just learned so much. After conferring with Gwen, I think we are just going to power through and just do some questions now. Gwen is actually, if you want to put some questions in the chat, that'd be great. Gwen is going to talk about our next LACONI program.
Thank you. Thank you. I loved this presentation. I loved everything all of you brought to it. I love the diversity of knowledge you all had. So thank you ever so much. I just want to tell you, we do not have a date confirmed. We do not have a time confirmed yet. We have a date. It is Wednesday, June 16th is going to be our next LACONI program. And what's exciting about it is that we are going to have 2 groups that are going to talk about how we are providing technology to patrons outside of the library. So we are going to have the Library Freedom Project and PCs for the People speak, and they are going to talk about diverse needs. For example, they're going to talk about how there's a group that is providing cell phones to homeless right now and how that program is working. PCs for the People works with library organizations to get used computers to then help people and bring that technology to people who need it. So it's going to be a great program and information is forthcoming on that.
Thank you. It's a little quiet in the chat box. So I'm going to go after some set questions, which we had kind of thought about. One of the pieces I loved the most about this program is I do not work in IT, and our IT manager doesn't really take the time to educate us as librarians. And so some of the measures that are in place definitely seem, ridiculous to a lay person. So do you guys have any thoughts on educating library staff? Is it the job of IT? Is it the job of the administration? I'd love to hear, if you've seen any examples that work and kind of how that works.
I'll take a stab at it. I don't work in the library, so I'm the guy that just goes around and says, you should do this, and then I leave. Although listening to what everybody said today, we didn't So for everybody watching, we didn't coordinate our presentations at all, but it really worked out absolutely perfectly. So I think it's when I'm talking, I always say, if you're here listening to me, maybe it's now your job to do that. Maybe you should at least get started and talk to your coworkers. And Eric said at work in Slack, we use Slack too. I do the same thing. I post stuff to Slack and I say, hey, you know, something went wrong. This could impact us. This is in the news, whatever. So make it, if there's nobody there, make it part of your job to at least sort of ease into it and explain, you know, why it's important that you don't have one password for everything, why we're now forcing two-factor authentication. And it's for people who do the training, and especially the phishing testing. I don't know if anybody saw some just recently, last month, I think there was a librarian on Twitter and they got phished, and it was an exercise, and it was a COVID-19 phish, which is super successful. And they were pissed because they got phished and they thought it was a real email that they could get their vaccine. And it was a huge thread. There was like I don't know, 1,000 people replying, and it was, most people were like, IT bad. But some people were like, but that's exactly why we do these things, because it worked. And I felt absolutely horrible for the person. But man, nobody who followed that thread is ever going to get phished again. So I don't know, maybe in the big picture that worked. But it's important to remember that when we're securing things, it's a pain in the ass. You know, we're forcing people to change how they work, and a lot of this gets in the way. You know, the opposite of I always say that the opposite of security is easy to use. It's not insecure. So it can be tough. So anyway, that's, I'm not in a library, so I don't know how to
I
recommend.
appreciate that. I think it's a good perspective. Aaron, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I was going to say, it's kind of funny. We've actually been having some of these conversations in our management meetings. We ended up purchasing a product from a third-party vendor that actually sends the fake emails through. And then we have the ability to, you know, if someone clicks it and it reports back to a central hub that says, hey, so-and-so clicked this or so-and-so clicked that. The one challenge I think that I have seen, at least some of my limited experiences, I don't know that, and I'm going to stereotype here, so forgive me, but sometimes IT people tend to be wired a little differently than I think our like librarians or whatever. And so depending on who you have working in your IT team, sometimes, you know, being very good at coding does not always denote that you have, you know, good people skills or a good bedside manner. And certainly within our organization, we had the experience that there is a great gulf in the amount of tech literacy or computer literacy. We have people who can, for lack of a better word, they're lucky if they get their computer turned on in the morning, up through that people, you know, you do a lot of gaming and do their own PC builds and stuff like that. And I have found that we've had some very tech savvy people in our organization actually have clicked some of these spoof emails. We had one that was particularly, someone had managed to make an email that actually sounded like Faith, which was kind of weird. Some of the mannerisms in it. And so we had a person who I would have probably put in our top 5% clicked on it and was quite embarrassed. And we actually, what we've come up with so far is we decided that the direct supervisors of those people who clicked on the emails, we require them then to view a video or, you know, take a training. And we actually tasked the direct supervisors with, we gave them the information of what the person had clicked on, and then they were supposed to go to their staff member and, you know, explain, ask what was it about this email that made you click it, and then explain, you know, what about it was odd, like the from email address might be off, or, you know, if you're probably not going, your bank is not going to be sending you emails about your account to a work related account, or if you are receiving bank related emails at your work account, then maybe that's a discussion about appropriate and inappropriate use of your email. So that's kind of what we've been doing on our end, at least initially. and there is a lot of apprehension in staff. That was when we had our cyber event. Staff were scared to death that, oh my gosh, was I the one that clicked it or whatever? And to begin with, we didn't know. We just knew where it originated, and the attack had taken some staff accounts and changed them. So we were thinking that there was a staff member that might have been the origin of the attack, but we didn't drop names or anything. But I think people do take it seriously, and they don't want to be that person. It's just, making sure that you talk to them. So that's how we've gone initially.
That's really great. I really love what you said about IT not having the best training skills or whatnot. I'm actually a head of digital services, and I, in my role, act like a bridge to IT. I say I translate IT. They have moved to IT support specialists underneath me. So I do level 1, can't turn on my computer. But a lot of what I do is I'm watching the tickets and thinking, this is a training opportunity. So many people are having this. We all kind of joined, started using Office 365 during the pandemic, and it just confuses, everyone's so confused by it still. And so, I think having training sessions, but that's not something, our IT guy is, doing server work, and he's really busy all the time, that he's not thinking in that mindset of, oh, I should train staff. There's a lot more frustration on the IT end of like, why don't they just get it? And so I do think it is helpful to pair IT with, in a lot of libraries, we are the ones teaching the technology classes, so it really is like a nice match. But I think it's just so important to have these conversations and to kind of get everybody on the same page. So thank you.
Okay, someone in the chat has written, how important is it to have HTTPS for your website?
It's not optional anymore.
Yeah, a lot of things will just stop working. Security certificates are, not even an industry standard. It's just like your emails won't go out. People can't get to your site. There's a lot of browsers that won't open a site that doesn't have the security certificates. So yeah, that's, as someone said, it's not an option. It's just your stuff will stop working.
And I also see in the question and answer, some libraries have talked about KnowBe4, which does the fake phishing emails. And they said as a tech expert, they were embarrassed when they got them. So I think stuff like that, really showing people. I actually had reached out to them to speak, and they're very expensive. And you guys are much better. So I do think it's a good, I don't know if anybody knows the cost for using it, but I've heard really good things.
That's so funny. They spam me all the time. I just got a voicemail and an email from them. They've been pestering me for months and months.
Yeah, well, and that's like, I filled out the form online and then just got like blown up.
Yes.
That's not what I want. I want you to speak, and then that was a whole nother thing.
Like I literally just got it seconds ago too.
They know you're here.
Yes.
You talked about the fake email that went out from the director. I work at Oakton Community College, and the president of the college, it's just an interesting thing. We get those a lot, like kind of weird, and from her, she said, if I answer an email myself, I will always use my nickname. This is my nickname, so she says, don't take that as the gospel truth when you're reading these things, but just know that 99% of the time when you get an email with my formal name, it is not for me.
Well, that's all we have. This was amazing, and I'm really thrilled that we were able to offer. And the upside of this pandemic has been that we have people from across the country, and we're really thrilled that you guys were all able to share your knowledge. And I learned a lot, and I hope everybody else did. So that's all I have.
I think someone asked at the beginning if the slides were going to be available afterwards. So is it that you're sharing the recording, or could you tell people?
I'm going to share the recording, but if you guys want to send me your slides, I'd be happy to pass them along to the attendees as well. So thank you all. Thank you, Blake, Faith, Eric, and Aaron. Phenomenal presentations. And we didn't coordinate that well, but they really worked beautifully together. So hats off to all of us. But thanks again. Thank you all who attended, and thank you, Gwen, for being my great moderator.
Wonderful, and thank you, Susie. This was amazing. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.